Hello friends, we are continuing our discussion on new trade theories which are modification and extension of Heckscher-Ohlin theory. Today we are analyzing the theory on volume of trade and demand pattern popularized by Swedish economist Stefan Linder, also called Linder hypothesis. Welcome to the session. So, the Linder's theory focuses on the volume of trade and demand pattern. It's one of the important theories that focuses on the composition of trade, the pattern of trade, and in fact the influence of demand pattern on the composition of the trade. Now, as we said, it was popularized by Stefan B. Linder in the year 1961 in his work titled An Essay on Trade and Transformation. This theory, or what is known as the Linder's hypothesis, is a dramatic departure from a number of attributes with respect to the Heckscher-Ohlin model. That is, the Linder's theory is able to explain a number of key issues which the Heckscher-Ohlin model in fact failed to explain or elaborate. Now let us examine one by one. This theory is a demand-oriented theory. Title itself, there is a demand pattern. Linder's theory focuses on demand condition, while the Heckscher-Ohlin model was essentially a supply-based theory. Hope you remember our Heckscher-Ohlin prediction. What is the Heckscher-Ohlin theory? Heckscher-Ohlin theory says that a country will specialize in the production and export of those commodities that utilizes country's abundant factor intensively. So that's as far as Heckscher-Ohlin theory is concerned. So it focuses on production. Heckscher-Ohlin theory focuses on production and the resultant export, or it is basically a supply-based theory. While the Linder theory is demand-oriented theory and it exclusively focuses on demand condition and how this demand condition can in fact influence the trade pattern. Now, Linder pointed out that the demand condition of any country is influenced by the taste and preferences. The taste and preferences in any country is conditioned by or is influenced by the income level, or what Linder called the level of per capita income, PCI. Per capita income is income per head, total income or national income divided by population. We will get average income, which is known as the per capita income. So according to Linder, the taste and preference of any country is conditioned by the income level, or more specifically the per capita income. So these taste and preferences will constitute the demand, and this demand of the what he called the representative consumers of the country or majority consumers of the country will result in the production of those commodities demanded by majority consumers of the country. And this production will in fact lead to the export of the country. That means Linder illustrates that a country will export those commodities which is in fact produced in a large manner domestically, and this production influenced by the demand pattern. Now let us examine like this. That means the taste is in fact lead to the demand, and both the taste and demand are influenced by the per capita income, and these taste and demand result in the production of the commodity. Obviously, producers will produce those commodities which is demanded by the majority of the consumers in the country. A very simple logic in our microeconomic discussion. So there will be taste constitute the demand, and this demand in fact determines the nature of production, and this production forms the basis for trade or basis for export. Linder also pointed out that there can be a preference similarity. There can be a preference similarity. That's why many times this theory is also called a preference similarity hypothesis or overlap in demand hypothesis. Let us explain how this in fact happens. According to Linder, high-income people and high-income countries will basically prefer or essentially prefer high-quality commodities. That is, high-income countries produce high-income or high-quality commodities because high-income countries will have a domestic demand biased in favor of high-quality commodities. Similarly, low-income countries will produce low-quality commodities because low-income countries or the consumers in the low-income countries demand low-quality commodities. So, there can be a preference similarity how most of the high-quality commodities, if not all, according to Linder, most of the high-quality commodities will be produced in the high-income countries. That means those countries having higher per capita income, higher income will produce higher quality commodities because it is demanded by larger segment or larger chunk of the consumers of those countries. So, high quality commodities will be produced in the high income country and low quality commodities will be produced in the low income country. Further, according to him, when there is this kind of a pattern, most of the high quality commodities will be produced being in the high income countries, there will be increased trade among the high income countries. Got the point? That means those countries who are at a higher per capita income will produce mostly similar commodities but differentiated commodities, and there will be increased trade between them. That means there will be increased international trade among countries having similar factor endowments. Another departure from the Heckscher-Rohley model. Hope you remember, in Heckscher-Rohley model, there can be trade between two countries having entirely different kind of factor endowment. A labor abundant country is trading with a capital abundant country. Two countries having dissimilar factor endowment. But here, increased trade or international trade is increasingly taking place among countries having similar factor endowments. That means trade between industrialized countries rather than trade between industrialized countries and developing countries or less developed countries. So Linder pointed out that most of the increased international trade or most of the trade will take place between the developed countries because their preference pattern is similar. Their preference pattern is similar because most of the citizens of the country will demand high quality products and there can be trade between them. So, trade will take place between the industrialized countries or between those countries having higher per capita income. There can be a preference similarity, and this preference similarity also can lead to what he called overlap in demand. So, what is overlap in demand? In any country, there will be those people having high per capita income as well as low per capita income. Because no country or no society have equal distribution of economic resources. There can be unequal distribution, obviously there will be unequal income as well. So, there will be a segment of the population, there will be a segment even in the developed country or even in those countries having very high per capita income, there will be a minority. There will be a minority who requires commodities with low quality. So, in every country there will be high, or in fact in the developed countries or those countries having higher per capita income, majority of the consumers demand high quality products. But there will be a minority who will be demanding low quality products as well. Opposite is true as far as a low income country is concerned. Majority demands low quality commodities, but there will be a minority who requires or who demand high quality commodities. In every country there can be unequal distribution of income. So there will be overlap in demand. So a portion of trade will also be taking place between high income countries and low income countries because of this overlapping demand overlaps, because at least a segment of the consumers of developed country demand the products being produced in the developed country, and similarly a segment of the consumers of the developed country requires commodities or demand commodities being produced in the developing country as well or the less developed country as well. So the crux of the theory was, in fact, this theory basically asserts that if you want to export more, or if your export base is determined by your domestic production base, your domestic production determines your export. And what determines domestic production? It is determined by the taste and preferences, which in fact constitute the demand. So volume of trade is influenced by demand pattern, and this demand pattern is influenced by the level of per capita income. Because Linder believes that international trade is only an extension of domestic trade. That means those commodities which are domestically produced in larger quantities will be traded, because large demand will lead to large production, and this country will earn comparative advantage in the production of those commodities. They will earn innovative power, they will have greater specialization, higher production, benefit of economies of scale, and it will obviously lead to export of this commodity as well. So large export requires large domestic production, and this large domestic production is in fact determined by the level of demand pattern. So volume of trade is determined by demand pattern, and there will be preference similarity. Preference similarity leads to a situation in which international trade will be taking place between countries having similar factor endowments, not with dissimilar factor endowments. So another departure from the Heckscher-Ohlin model. And also there can be overlap in demand, because the less developed countries might to demand at least a segment of those commodities produced in the developed countries, and opposite also, or vice versa also will be true. And on another aspect, as far as this theory of the Linder's hypothesis or Linder theory of volume of trade and demand pattern is concerned, is that he only focuses on manufactured goods. That means this theory, the entire argument as far as this theory is concerned, it only focuses on manufactured goods, because Linder pointed out that his arguments are more correct, or in fact more true, when we talk about the manufactured goods. Because manufactured goods, there can be differentiation, there can be a situation in which manufactured goods can be increasingly traded, and he argues that, or in fact he admits that the Heckscher-Ohlin theory is capable, or more than enough capable, of explaining trade in primary commodities. That is, trade in primary commodities will be determined by the factor endowment theory or the Heckscher-Ohlin theory, but they cannot correctly explain the trade in manufactured goods. And in fact, one of the important shortcomings of the Heckscher-Ohlin model is that that particular theory do not explain what causes increased international trade between industrialized countries, which is a pattern which was prevalent right from the Second World War. After the Second World War, there was increased international trade between the developed countries of the world, but strictly following the Heckscher-Ohlin model, we cannot explain that particular kind of a pattern, because in Heckscher-Ohlin model, trade can take place between countries having dissimilar factor endowments. A less developed country, which is expected to be a labor abundant country, is trading with a capital abundant country. So countries having different kind of factor endowments are trading with each other. But Linder pointed out that because of all these reasons which we have already been cited, there will be increased trade between countries having similar income levels, because similar income levels produce similar taste and preferences. Similar taste and preference produce similar kind of a production. Similar kind of a production result similar kind of an export. They will trade between each other. There will be increased trade between countries having similar income levels. That's why we call it, there is a preference similarity, and there can be overlapping demand as well, because the consumers of the other country will demand the consumers of one country will obviously demand some of the commodities produced in the other country as well. So domestic production leads to, or in domestic production in fact create a base for export. Now, and this theory only focuses on manufactured goods. Now let us examine this theory or the Linder's hypothesis using an arbitrary example. We will cite a case of 3 countries having different levels of per capita income, producing a few commodities. Now let us examine how international trade can take place between the case of 3 countries having different level of per capita income. Now let us examine this case. Okay, now to illustrate the Linder's theory or Linder's hypothesis, let us take the example of three countries, country 1, 2 and 3, having different levels of per capita income. Let us start with the case of country 1. Let us assume that the income level of country 1 produces the taste or in fact results in the demand for 5 commodities A, B, C, D, E having different kind of qualities. Now let us also assume that these commodities are arranged in ascending order on the basis of quality. That means as we move down, the quality increases. That means commodity D and E are having higher quality than that of A and B. So when we move down, the quality increases. So this is the case of country 1. So the per capita income of country 1 result in the demand, or what in the Linder's terminology, result in the taste and preferences, and these taste and preferences lead to demand and the production of these commodities. So country 1 will produce these commodities because domestic production, as we saw, it is conditioned by the domestic demand, which is in fact conditioned by the per capita income. Now, so the country 1 will produce these commodities. Now let us explore the case of another country, country 2, which is having a relatively higher per capita income. That is, the per capita income of country 2 is higher than that of country 1, and their income level or their per capita income produces or result in the demand for these commodities C, D, E, F, G. See the point? That is, the commodities A and B is not produced in country 2 because they are having higher level of income, and as Linder pointed out, as income increases, your demand for the quality products also increases. That means these two commodities or commodities A and B, which is relatively lesser quality or least quality products, are not demanded by the consumers of country 2, and obviously the producers of the country 2, since there is no domestic demand, will not produce commodity A and B, and they will produce C, D, E, F, G. So there is production, domestic production of 5 commodities in country 1 and 5 commodities in country 2 as well. And these commodities are represented with different alphabets. Now, let us explore the possibility of international trade. Linder pointed out that the international trade will take place on the basis of preference, similarity and overlap in demand. Now, let us explore where lies the preference similarity. The commodities will be traded A, B, C, D, E in country 1, and as far as country 2 is concerned, they produce C, D, E, F, G. What are the where lies the overlap in demand? Overlap in demand lies in the case of these 3 commodities C, D, E. That is, international trade between country 1 and country 2 will take place in the case of commodity C, D, E, because these 3 commodities are having the preference similarity as well as overlap in demand. That's the case of country 1 and country 2. So, domestic production, preference similarity and overlap in demand result in the international trade between 2 countries. Let us bring the case of yet another country, country 3, which is having even higher per capita income. That is, country 3 is having the highest amount of per capita income. Now, the income level, the high per capita income of country 3 result in the demand for these 5 products E, F, G, H, J. That is, the per capita income of country 3 is so higher that they demand these higher quality products, because Linder has pointed out that as your income increases, your demand for high quality products also increases. So as your per capita income increases, demand for high quality products also increases. Now, let us explore the possibility of trade with these two countries with respect to the country 3. Remember the point, country 3 is having the highest amount of per capita income in our 3 example. Now, when there is specialization, when there is domestic production of E, F, G, H, J in country 3, can see that there is overlap in demand, or what is called, what we said, there is a preference similarity of the production of which commodity? E, F, G. See, E, F, G in country 3 and E, F, G in country 2. So the trade between country 2 and country 3 will be that of E, F, G. E, F, G, because there is the overlap in demand and preference similarity between country 2 and country 3. Now let us finally also explore the case of trade between the first country and the third country. That is, the country having lowest level of or the least amount of per capita income and the country is having highest amount of per capita income. Now, where lies country 1 produce A, B, C, D, E and country 3 produce E, F, G, H, J, and there is preference similarity only in the case of one particular commodity. See, there is only the case of commodity E. So the trade will be international trade between country 1 and country 3 will be only with respect to one commodity, that is commodity, because it is having only the preference similarity or the overlap in demand lies in the case of only just one commodity, which is commodity E. So the essence of this theory is that countries having similar level of income. See this point, between country 1 and 2, between country 2 and 3. Having similar level of per capita income produces large quantity of trade or larger trade. So more intense trade, larger volume of trade. We are talking about the volume of trade as well. The larger volume of trade will be taking place between countries having similar level of factor endowment, having similar level of income. The trade between international trade between countries having dissimilar factor endowment, as we saw in the case of example between country 1 and 3, will be relatively smaller. As we said, it's a dramatic departure from the Heckscher-Rohlin model, because Heckscher-Rohlin model believes that more trade will take place between countries with dissimilar factor endowments. But Linder hypothesis pointed out that countries having similar factor endowments trade more with each other because they will be having preference similarity and what we call the overlap in demand. One more point can be noted from this example. We saw that countries trade with each other with commodities. That means the trade between country 1 and country 2 is with C, D, E. But who specializes on C? Who specializes on D? Who specializes on E? It was not explained by Linder, but Linder pointed out that the trade will be a two-way. That means both countries will export and import commodity C, export and import commodity D, export and import commodity, similar with those of the case of the other countries as well. That means same commodities will be exported and imported. What was that? That's the intra-industry trade. We saw in our case in our examination on international trade under imperfect competition, where we have defined intra-industry trade as a country is both exporting and importing items in the same product classification category. That is intra-industry trade. So Linder pointed out that the trade in manufactured goods between countries having similar factor endowments will be intra-industry trade, in which countries will be both exporting and importing products in the same product classification category. And we also saw that when there is intra-industry trade, there will be product differentiation as well. There will be product differentiation, there will be increased production, there will be the economies of scale, and this product differentiation, economies of scale, will lead to greater intensity of intra-industry trade. Another departure from the Heckscher-Ohlin model, because Heckscher-Ohlin model only talks about inter-industry trade. Countries trades with different commodities, not with the same commodities or not with the similar commodities. Trade pattern was inter-industry in Heckscher-Ohlin model. But Linder pointed out that when there is product differentiation, when there are similarities in the per capita income, or there is factor endowment, similar factor endowments, trade or international trade in manufactured goods will be intra-industry. So that's it as far as the Linder hypothesis is concerned. Just to have a quick recap. So this theory, Linder, is basically an extension but a dramatic explanations of most trade which was taking place among industrialized countries of the world. His argument is that domestic production in turn determines the external trade or foreign trade, and these domestic productions are conditioned by the domestic demand, which was essentially determined by the level of per capita income of the country. As your per capita income increases, your demand for higher quality products also increases. And he argues that most of the low quality commodity will be produced in the less developed countries because demand will be higher. Domestic demand will be higher for those commodities, and high quality commodities will be produced in the developed countries. The same argument was put forward in our product cycle theory as well. When we saw trade based on technology differences, almost the same arguments were there in the product cycle theory. And the advantage of this model is that it conclusively explains how or what are the reasons behind large trade between developed countries of the world having similar factor endowments. And Linder pointed out that the preference, similarity and overlapping demand, two terms coined by Linder, is behind the pattern of international trade among the developed countries of the world and even among the developing countries of the world. And this explained number of aspects which the Heckscher-Ohlin model failed to analyze. So that's all as far as Linder's theory is concerned. Hope that this video is useful to you. So until we meet next time, stay safe, happy learning. Thank you.